is an urgent thing. This is why this interview is here, so we can talk about this and we can get the details and what's happening on the ground in northern Iraq to the public.
Yeah, uh, the recent bombing, actually, it comparing it to the ones before was little less, or the ones before were bigger and affected more. But specifically by this bombing, by this the last campaign, if we may say, that started by Turkey against PKK. Uh, Before 2 days, there was 13 villages that were emptied at
Wow.
all for 2 days, and because of the bombing, because they couldn't stood even that. Since years, they are just hearing the bombing near them, but it's not really like, when they leave the village, it means that it's on the top, like it's so near them that it could affect them directly in their house or in their church, or like uh, horrifying them. But if you go, like, for example, today there was just bombing, and ironically, one of the people of Chillik, one of the village that they were uh, or emptied, he was like, well, today it was fine, and we tried to return to the town. It was fine comparing to the other days, because the bombing wasn't really near us. So it's like, there is bombing, there is PKK around. There is actually in some village that they come inside the town. Like one of the times I saw it in my by my eyes, that they are in open area making a party in one of our towns. It's like there is a fight between you and Turkey, like PKK and Turkey, and Turkey is bombing wherever you are. So they are partying in the middle of the town. So that's really bringing the fire to our town, and using our people as human shields. But at the same time, Turkey is saying, wherever and whenever is the PKK, we will bomb them. So it's like two sides fighting, and we are in the middle continuously. So just slightly, thank God there was no casualties from our people, and they didn't lose a lot of the farming land that had been burned in the years before. For example, in Nala Valley and other areas, there was just one of the cars of a teacher had been affected by some scraps, but the bombing was really near the town of Bersiveh, and there was a video published that you can hear the children crying from because it was so near the village. And that's like, thank God there was somebody to record that video, and then it became like it reached many places in the world and the media and so on. But this is continuously happening. And the other times, like now, uh, like the people of these specific towns in the border, the 13 villages, for example, that are mentioned down, are not really practicing their life. They have gardens in the mountain, they have farming places in the mountain. They can't go because they are afraid that uh, the airstrikes may think they are PKK and they will bomb them. They have shepherds, they have sheep to go in the mountains to feed them. They can't anymore since many years. So it's like economically attacking them, like affecting them, and psychologically, and from all sides is affecting them.
Wow. So at this particular time, Naren, do we know any actual more statistics? I thank you, Arthur Cato, because you spoke about 13 tribes being pushed out. Naren, do you have any statistics more about what's happened so we can know more about the damage that's been caused in these particular areas? Because clearly there's an agenda to push the people out, which it doesn't take much. I mean, you start bombing, that's a clear indication there will be a lot of lives lost if you don't leave. So evacuating the area doesn't take much to do if they're continuing to bomb. And this is not something that I agree with. I mean, this is absolutely terrible. So the damage, the harm, I really want to hear your perspective on this too, Naren.
Absolutely, Darwin. That's a great question. And the damage, the most of the damage is done to the PKK. Thankfully, even though I don't agree with Turkish foreign policies, but we need any type of terrorist to get out of our hometowns. Just get out. And so the infrastructure damage is definitely there. The impact just from a bomb landing on the ground, that's, and our people thrive on their crops, and, the agriculture is really important just historically in the Fertile Crescent. So this psychological trauma, that's the type of damage that cannot be reversed. Our people have Absolutely. And our people have endured just centuries of psychological trauma, genocide, the constant oppression attacks. And that is because we don't have prominent borders. We don't have our state of Assyria with self-government. That would definitely be a solution to correct the problem, as I've expressed to President Trump. And so this type of trauma, people are constantly contacting me, our people, Yazidis, even Kurds themselves. And they're just saying, they're very afraid. They're hearing the bombings. They don't know if they should leave. They want to speak out about it. They're just so terrified. These people that were too afraid to ever speak out, they're at a point where they don't even care if they're going to get killed by the governments for speaking out. They just want to let the word out, what they're doing to their towns, what they're doing to their people, what that is constantly being done. And that's something I'm hearing in their voice, I'm seeing in their faces. It's awful. And it's just this repetitive attack, repetitive, constant behavior. And I want to clarify as well for our American audience about the PKK, about these Kurdish rebel groups. What they're doing is they're building these underground tunnels, which is actually a very common tactic of a terrorist group like Hamas, like Al-Qaeda, ISIS.
Wow,
they're building these tunnels. Yes. So what they're doing is Turkey is also they've also deployed Turkish soldiers to try to find these tunnels, to put different type of monitoring strategies to find out if they're going to keep building these tunnels. So now our hometowns have literally become a war zone, aside from, the current bombings, but we're afraid that this is going to keep happening because now Turkeys came in literally on boot. They're actually on the grounds, even if the locals may not know yet. Yes, they are there. They're on the ground. It's not just the Air Force bombing. And they're doing that to monitor what the PKK is doing and to try to wipe them out completely, like they are doing in Syria as well. So this is a very dangerous tactic. And actually, the tunnels that were built even by Hamas to Israel, they were able to drag IDF soldiers from the tunnels back to their borders and behead them or slaughter them. This is a very scary thing. We will lose people. We will lose Assyrians because anyone who doesn't comply with them, this is going to be their murder areas underground to create more genocide tactics where no one can see it on any kind of drone, any kind of human rights UN monitoring that is happening. And this is a scary thing. And this is why groups like PKK and working with YPG, and in fact, I have confirmed personally as well with a group of colleagues that they're all in cahoots together. Because when we were praising the elimination of PKK, let me tell you that in Washington, D.C., Kurdish lobbyists were on their knees crying, and they were so upset with us that we were in support of getting rid of a terrorist organization that is a terrorist organization on the United States terrorist watch list, on the UN, European Union terrorist watch list, on many other countries' terrorist watch list. This is a terrorist organization. They're not freedom fighters, for God's sakes. And they were so upset. These are Kurdish lobbyists who walk into the White House. They were crying because PKK was being bombed, which really, really concludes that they're all together, because the PKK is like their frontline workers. They are their Marines. that supposedly they're freedom fighters that go in to try to prepare a land to be grabbed, to steal. This is the truth. And I know that our CIA knows this, and this is a terrible thing that we must condemn, and we must not condone for a political agenda, because people are being slaughtered. And you know, we're the greatest country in the world. We're the United States of America, and we must step forward first and put an end to this, and secure these endangered people, the Assyrian people, which includes our Chaldeans and Syriacs, all of our churches, all of our denominations, all of our people, and indigenous people, almost 7,000 years old, to be given their state. We're not asking for something that's not ours. Those are our homelands. All of Iraq, Syria, parts of Turkey, parts of Iran. This is ancient Assyria, Darwin. And the best thing that President Trump can do and the United States government can do is build a state, rebuild a state that will be an ally to the whole world, that will, you know, promote unity, acceptance, democracy, and all of the great things that our values here in the United States and in the West have. And even Muslims will be able to live in peace and not be in these tribal wars against each other and this hate. You know, I've spoken to countless Sunnis and Shias and even Kurds, and you know what they said to me, Darwin? We wish Assyrians were in power. We wish Assyrians were in governance, because we know that things would be right. We know that we would live in equality. And that was so touching to me to hear. And that is the truth.
So my question is, I mean, you state that so beautifully, Naren, and you always have, and I think you paint a picture in the hearts and the minds of the viewers that, for me, you've made me a believer in the Assyrian cause, the Assyrian people, and we know how powerful the opposite lobby. You know, we've worked with organizations, we know people who run organizations, and they work against our efforts. But the PKK, certified terrorist group here, a terrorist organization, they're labeled here in America and other places. Now, who's running? This is just kind of an objective question. Who's running Iraq right now, as far as the prime minister, the government? What's the agenda there? And who's running things? Can you guys both give me a perspective on that? Especially you, Arthur. I want to know your perspective, because you're there, and I want to know what's the agenda here. What's really happening?
Well, supposedly the prime minister should be leading Iraq, and he is the commander, the highest general commander of the Iraqi forces. But the corruption
What's his name?
in Iraq,
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt you. What's his name? If you can describe him.
Kadhimi. He took his position lightly in a few months ago. But the situation was, after 2003, it was normally like that, because if we may say it in this way, that many countries are fighting each other inside Iraq. So the influence of Iran is so big in the government, and many parties are having these security forces, these militias are controlling wherever they want and doing whatever they want. So the corruption in Iraq, in between these political parties, these political groups, that some of them are radical, some of them are racist, and many of them are following other countries, are like bringing the agenda of Turkey inside Iraq, Saudi Arabia, then Iran, then like each group fighting the other group for another regional country. So there was some steps that happened that we don't really see a good result of, that the Iraqi army, or the borders, they call them the borders guards, that are in KRG, in these borders between Turkey and Iraq, in the Kurdistan regional government, they had been enforced, like they brought some enforcement in the borders, but that didn't really affect so much, because there is really big areas especially in our towns, that are controlled by PKK. Like even the Peshmerga can't go there without calling or contacting this PKK. While this is an Iraqi territory, and it's administratively and by Iraqi constitution controlled by the KRG. So it's like you must see some forces on the ground from this country, but you can't. You will see just, and in some areas they even put a checkpoint of PKK. Like you can see a checkpoint, they will check your card, your ID card, and to go to your own village by somebody you don't know where he is from or what does he want to do, but you know something that he is bringing bombing from Turkey. And if you stand against them, and as a people, as the civilians there, they are afraid to stand against this group because they might take them, they might kill them, or injure them in a way or another.
So Naren, who's in control there? Like, what is the agenda? Ultimately, I want to know your take on that.
Absolutely, Darwin, that's a great question, because you would think that the Iraqi central government would put their foot down and say, look, we need a united Iraq if they believe in a united Iraq. So why allow a regional government to grow, first of all? And I know that had a lot to do with the invasion in Iraq, taking out Saddam Hussein because he gassed the Kurds, and then they gave them a safe haven, which was their exact plan, something they've been trying to do since 1914. It failed. Then they tried again in 1933, where the Iraqi military was infiltrated by a general who claimed to be Iraqi, but he was Kurdish, and with an entire Kurdish agenda, Sadir to create this Kurdistan even then. And actually he was caught and killed. He was executed because for treason. He had fired all the Iraqi generals, or all the Iraqi sergeants and commanders, and replaced them with Kurdish ones. So the Iraqi military finally caught on to it and executed him. And now it's happening again. History is repeating itself. The president, I believe, Athra, you can correct me, he's of Kurdish descent of Iraq. Mustafa, is that correct, Athra?
Mustafa, I don't think he's Kurdish.
I know that he's part of the PUK. So they're connected. The problem is there's a lot of conflict of interest, Darwin, and they're connected to these Kurdish parties or Kurdish, politics, and that's a big conflict of interest. You have to put somebody in a prime minister position and in the government of Iraq, as far as the leading positions, the speaker positions, the prime minister position, that is not in that mentality, that beehive mentality, to only work for one agenda. They're not working for a united Iraq. And that is why Assyrians are fed up with this. This is the constant, decades of betrayal, of claiming that we are a united Iraq, because Assyrians, we wouldn't rebel against the government. We love all Iraqis. We love all Turkmens. We have Sunni Shias, even the Kurds, the Yazidis, we consider even part of us. But the problem is that there is no united Iraq, because the Kurds have created a regional government. So they are in control of northern Iraq, and they have made the Iraqi central government look this small, because when something is happening in one of our towns where they are literally removing the mayor of the town and replacing them with somebody with their Kurdish agenda, with their own personal agendas, and the central government can't even send a military there to remove her. I mean, that's ridiculous. And this is happening. This is how they do the demographic change. This is how they take over our towns one by one. And it is very important that we keep them out of the Nineveh Plains, because that is the last threshold we have left. The Iraqi central government, I believe the international communities really need to know there's a conflict of interest happening, because us placing a new government in power by removing Saddam Hussein, we must ensure that there is no biased racism and supporters of genocide, supporters of ethnic cleansing, separatists, the real separatists who are breaking up Iraq since 1914. Even Iraqis must acknowledge that this is a problem. And if they don't correct it, then this state of Assyria must be implemented immediately, because we cannot depend on anyone for protection. I had actually done some investigative journalism in Iraq and found out that actually, and even in Mosul, there were very high-ranking officers that were assigned to protect the Assyrian Christians, the Yazidis. Right before ISIS invaded, there were helicopters waiting for them that picked them up and took them to Erbil. How did they know that? How did they know that we were going to be invaded? And guess what their ethnicity was, Darwin? They were Kurdish. This whole time, I mean, how did they allow ISIS to invade? Why were our people disarmed right before ISIS? And I know that when I confronted the ambassadors in Washington, D.C., they didn't like my question. And I've told you off air what they did afterwards because they didn't like my question. But these things aren't by coincidence. This is all part of that same plan, just like we're being used as human shields, and they're attracting Turkish bombs. I mean, Turkish bombs, Darwin, are ruthless. I mean, they're a very strong military power. The way they are bombing and attacking, the way they are bombing PKK is they want to annihilate them. But the problem is PKK is using us, and we're caught right in the middle. And this is an ongoing problem. And I really, really hope to God that something is done. You know, when Saddam Hussein gassed the Kurds because they were rebelling against the central government, which I don't believe in massacring innocent people because they're rebelling against the government, but that is his mentality, his way of stopping a rebellious attack against the central government. And immediately what we did was implement a safe haven. What are we doing now? Our people, just not even to count the prior genocides, just since 2014, we have decreased in over 1 million and decreasing by the week, by the month, by the day. What are we doing for them? I know that President Trump supports a safe haven, and I know that there are so many things on the table, and including that, that we're being promised that he's working on. But this is very, very time sensitive. This needs to be done now so that amazing people like Athra stay in our homelands. My family, we were purged out, just like hundreds and millions of other Assyrians were purged out from fear of living, not knowing when your daughter is going to be kidnapped or your son would be forced to be drafted into a war that is ongoing, constant, unnecessary, and this is why. This is a strategy of genocide. And when Armenians, when they suffered a genocide, they fought for an Armenia, and they were supported to have a state of Armenia. We had a Jewish Holocaust, and they were able to reestablish Israel, rightfully so. And now it is time, in today's time, to reestablish the state of Assyria. This is the only way any nation can move forward, because every nation, every international leader is well aware of what's happening in Iraq. Nothing is a secret. They all know very well what's happening to the Assyrian people, all of our churches that have distracted, and they all have a responsibility, because they are all militarily and financially funding groups like PKK, funding the KRG, and they have created a future problem for us, so they must correct it.
And see, the great thing, you just pointed out something when you stated about how you have this conflict of interest right now throughout Iraq. And I believe it's because of that conflict of interest that you have the Kurds, multiple sects, different things, but they're being used. And in pretty much any way the wind blows, the administration goes, the Kurds pretty much go in that direction to establish themselves. And I did some research before this interview, and it stated that, because of the Assyrians' population and their numbers, it's like almost a disadvantage politically, which is absurd, because, when there's, doing right is right. Morally doing the right thing shouldn't necessarily be based upon. And why do you think these populations continue to get lower and lower and lower, as you stated? Simply because no one has supported the Assyrian people as they should have, and created the safe haven so that they could, and maybe more people will return back to Iraq. maybe more, those numbers could easily go up if you start having individuals to do that. So my question is, will we ever get back to a biblical worldview on Iraq? It seems there's so many different contradictions, and as we spoke before, and I even had a chance to speak with Arthur and let him know some of the things and experiences where I come from being a pro-Israel activist. I just came back from Israel, and I would probably been 2-3 times to Israel, hadn't, COVID and everything started. So Israel is military strong. Israel is increasing. I believe, and it's even stated, even Arab countries are admitting this, that Israel is going to be controlling a lot, or at least the strategic agenda for the Middle East concerning Iraq and just the Middle East in general. Do we and will we have a biblical Middle East in the sense of Iraq to support the Jewish state? Is this something that is something the Assyrian or Iraqi individuals are willing to get behind in order to bring that peace? Because peace is important. But if we don't have a biblical worldview on things, then I don't know if that peace is going to be sustained. I mean, even with that enforced, we're still going to, I mean, it's throughout Revelations, throughout the Bible, we know there's going to be wars and rumors of wars. There's going to be things that happen where nations are going to rise up against Israel. But my question is this an agenda that we can get behind in the Middle East? As far as Iraq, will we have a biblical Middle East? Will this be an agenda? Because I believe that's the only way that the Assyrian people are going to be recognized for who they really are. Their history goes back as the Chinese, as the Jews, as everyone else. I mean, seriously, it's documented. Like, you can't just annihilate a people and push them out. But if we don't stay true to the biblical worldview of things, now that Israel is strong, I believe there is some negotiations. I even heard that you had a coalition of Assyrians in Israel negotiating on the future of the Aramaic language and things of that, which is great reports. But where are we going to go with this? And again, that's not excluding Muslims, and that's not excluding anything like that, because you have Muslims and Christians and Jews right in even Israel and Jerusalem. So my question would be, are we going to get to this biblical worldview as far as Iraq and the Middle East?
We believe in that, and actually we are working on it. Even that on the ground we are facing many occasions. If we focus on the political side, that we are facing during the last years, and we were thinking after 2003, we were believing that the next Iraq will be better, and we believe in peace. We are Christians, so we believe in peace. We want to give love and to receive love at the same time. So we were hopeful that we will see something to change for our people after 2003. But after that, we saw something else, that it became worst by especially from the religious side, by Al-Qaeda and other groups. And then here in northern Iraq, we are facing racism, that you can see that the KRG is showing that they are protecting Christians. So yeah, you are praying and that's it. I can put pressure on you, but yeah, you can go to your church, that's it, and that's your life. So
I don't mean to interrupt you either, but I want to ask a question. So when we talk about the Islamic State, I mean, right now, we have to be very honest about the conflict in Iraq. I mean, that was an Islamic agenda. And right now you have an agenda being pushed, whether it's Islamic, whether it is, based on supporting the Jewish state. And I think it's very black and white here. So what powers are in control? And Assyrians, they're in the Bible. So at some point we have to really nip this in the bud. I believe there's going to be more rumors of wars and more wars and more chaos if you push a radical Islamic agenda in Iraq. And that, to me, is where Assyrians are going to continue to be persecuted, because when you even have sayings throughout the Arab nations that in Islamic nations that first you kill the Jews and then you later kill the Christians, it's very clear what the agenda is. So at some point, are we going to get real about this? And I know the historical, ethnic, and other type of conflicts, but right now we don't have, the Syrian people don't have time for that. You know, we have to stick to what really the agenda is going to be. So do you really believe we're going to have either more radical Islamic culture there, or are we going to have more of a pluralist type of Christian, or even, you know, that can acknowledge the state of Israel? Like, what are we going to have here? Because in my opinion, I only see one way in this situation.
Athra, maybe you can touch on Prophet Nahum's tomb in Al-Qush and how Assyrians have been taking care of it for over 2,000 years. And, you know, Athra, like maybe just touch on, and Darwin, just, you know, the fact when Assyrians have a friendship with all civilized nations and all civilized people, we respect all identities and all religions. And because we created the first laws, the Code of Hammurabi, the first cities, you know, and not to go deep into that, but we speak with actions too, not just words. So for example, our people have been taking care of a Jewish prophet, Nahum's tomb, for over 2,000 years, including Athra's family. They rotate to take care of this tomb and literally protected it with their life. And nobody else did that but the Assyrian people in Al-Qush. And the Assyrians lived in peace with the Jews. You know, we were like family together, and the whole time Assyrians were in any power in that region, or were in great numbers in that region, we worked with the Jews, we learned from each other, and you know, we protected them. Even my grandmother had fought face to face with some Kurds who killed a Jewish doctor right in front of her. But the Assyrians have an ideology of democracy, of peace, of faith, of God. So that would answer your question. And I believe Athra is in a very difficult position of where he's at, being surrounded by radicals. And it's very difficult also to answer questions like that without facing immediate repercussions. But I just want Israel to look at our actions and not just what we are publicizing in an area where people literally have a gun and a sword to their heads. Even though Kurds claim that they are friends with Israel, that they support Israel, but let's speak the truth. Who got rid of all the Jews in northern Iraq? My family is a testimony to the constant attacks against the Jewish doctors and engineers of what they did to the Jews in northern Iraq. And now they are claiming that they are best friends with them because they know that Israel has a great political strength, militarily strength. They, you know, they have incredible power in Congress and Senate, in the United States Senate. So of course, these are just words, Darwin. This doesn't mean anything. All they have to look at is their background. And you know, I'm not trying to ruin a relationship that they have formed, but it's basically like you're building a house out of glass, you know, and supporting the Assyrians would be building a concrete cement foundation, because we have been living in peace together, and just looking at something that small, which to us is big, maybe small to them, taking care of Prophet Nahum's tomb for over 2,000 years. People can barely take care of their own houses for 50 years. And maybe Athra can touch in details about this Prophet Nahum's tomb in Al-Qush.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Naren, for speaking up for Athra, talking about the security concerns, because I have to always keep that in mind. We all do, including viewers. There's some things that may be stated, some things we may not, because of the safety of where he actually is. So that's a great point. And so many things you just stated, Naren. But I wanted to touch on something because I had a chance to meet, I want just to be sure, I met a father, he's a bishop, a Gabriel Nadar. And excuse me, I believe he's a Syrian, if I'm correct. But I had a chance to meet with him, and he's speaking for Christians in Israel right now. And he's creating an alliance there that I've never seen before. And so I want to see if this can continue and build. And I'll do everything on my part to speak out for the Syrian people in the consideration of an Assyrian safe haven, in consideration of even what a state would look like for that. But please, if you can, add to some of the commentary we've just discussed, if you could, sir.
Yeah, actually, I just want to add something because Nahran mentioned many things. That in all this area in northern Iraq, the only tomb, the only building that's still surviving is Nahom in Al-Qush. And not just because it's protected, as the people of Al-Qush used to protect Al-Qush regularly from anybody. Nobody else did. Like literally nobody protected Al-Qush during the history. But it's the opposite. Many times the army wanted to attack Al-Qush, but the people stood against. And so not only that's protected, but in other areas had been these shrines and these religious Jewish areas, in addition, and beside the Christian areas, sites had been destroyed in all other areas in northern Iraq and in all Iraq. But the only thing that happened to, which is beside my house, actually, we are neighbors to the building of Nahom Tomb, and the only thing that affected it, because there was no renovation, and because the government used to prevent the people to renovate it, so it collapsed.
Oh, wow.
It collapsed parts of it, and now, thanks to God, it's being renovated in a very professional way. What I wanted to mention that yes, we want a state that we have power in, but even a small part of it, that if we are calling, like while we talk with politicians, while we talk with the media about this point of state, they are like, well, you are a minority. Even that, if we get back to it, that there is a reason that we became minority, but we go forward with them. In 2014, there was a decision by Iraqi Ministers' Council that to create a new province for the minorities, and the majority in this province would be the Yazidis and the Syrians. So it was in January. Then after 6 months, we faced ISIS in the area. So everything was stopped. After we get rid of ISIS in this area, now Nineveh Plain, the herd of the Assyrian Christians of Iraq, had been divided to two parts. That part of it is controlled by KRG, that they are claiming it's part of KRG and it's Kurdistan, and they are pushing for the agenda that already Nahran said, the mayor of Al-Qush had been changed forcibly on our people, and even that we demonstrated, we protested 3 times and we stood against it, and even the court of Iraq brought back the old mayor, but they didn't care. Actually, when he went to his office, they beaten him and kicked him out of the office, like government office. So the thing that we were aiming at, and to be logical politically, to have a province that could serve the minorities in the area administratively and militarily, to have our own forces, which we have approved that we are like, we have a Nineveh Plain protection units, and it is serving and protecting one of, or the biggest town in Nineveh Plain, which it contains currently 30,000. Before it was 55,000 before ISIS. Now we have 30,000 people that are security profile of that town, controlled by the Nineveh Plain protection unit, which is an Assyrian Christian force, and officially recognized and being paid by the government. So this force, you can never see any, like since 2014 until now, you will not see anything being used, like some actions that are against human rights or anything like other militias are doing. So we have a great example how we are able to protect ourselves, how we are able to administrate ourselves. But the main thing that we want to have is getting rid of, if we may call them, the outside agenda. We don't want any Kurdish agenda to like, especially the racist Kurdish agenda to come in our areas. We
Correct.
don't want any Iranian influence in our area. So what we are asking currently is only a province, which we are not getting, because the surrounding political parties and sides in Iraq. So if some countries are really not being like focusing on the number of the Assyrians, we are looking for province. So just let these sides that are fighting in our land go out from our areas. That's what we are asking for. And the most support that came, I would say it clearly that majority of the support that came to the KRG in the name of the Christians of Assyrians, Chaldeans, Syriacs had been used politically against these people.
I would agree.
So,
Specifically by the past administration, the former administration, I would absolutely agree. And just to say, in wrapping up, because I know we want to keep things within a certain time period, I want to leave this part of the interview and segment to put out the solutions to this problem. What are you asking for? What are you urging American politicians to do, viewers? If there's a number, if there's websites you can promote for, I think there's a Syrian Aid website. If Naren, you guys can put that out. I just would like to say in closing and to conclude that I would like to see a more of a biblical and complete biblical mandate for the Middle East, specifically the Syrian people and what is considered now Iraq. And I believe and I urge on American politicians to not back down or shy away because of political culture, any type of intimidation or backlash that they may fear, to stand up and biblically define the Middle East. And I think that is our roadmap for peace. And we know there's still going to be wars, even with a biblical worldview. But we know for sure that that is the truth. That is the way, that's the right way of going about it from a policy, international policy perspective. So I want to let you guys give us your solutions, what you're urging for individually, and we'll wrap this up. This is really just an introduction, and I know we'll do more further, and we'll continue this on as a series, is what I really view this to be, and we'll continue on.
Absolutely. Athra, if you want to start the...
Yeah. Actually, there is a political plan. What's in the Bible is the biggest goal, which is we believe that the Bible is giving the peace to the world. So what's written there is if we may say, the great solution for the area. But politically, we are really working for some steps. As I said, officially the basic decision is taken by the Iraqi government that to have our own province for the Assyrians and Yazidis in Shabak, and there is some other Arab village and so on. So establishing this new province, having our own local men to protect us, and these men to be supported directly on the ground, and not to have a militia or some force outside the government. No, to be part of the government of Iraq's security forces, but to have our own men, our own officers, that we are able to protect ourselves. We are able to do that. Also, that the administration side to be controlled by the people of the area, from the Yazidis, Assyrians, all like according to the democratic way. And then after that, to make it this province to be protected as a safe zone, and at the same time having international offices to watch, supervising the area to prevent this, as I said, that affected us since 2003, which are the racist and radical groups, and outside, like the regional countries' influence in the area. So basically, that's what we need. We don't need boots on the grounds. We just need the support. We are the boots on the ground, and we are those people who can administrate ourselves. We created the administration. We created everything since thousands of years. So we can do it today, and in that way, that's the only way we can survive here. And as you mentioned, Darwin, that we don't have enough time. We don't have enough time left for our people in our homeland. And about the website that is showing here, there is a campaign made by the Assyrian Aid Society. It's based in Iraq, and it has branches in America, Australia, and other Western countries. that is serving the Syrian people from the humanitarian side. And they made campaign to help these people in these villages to have better way of living, even that we can't stop the bombing currently, but at least help the people to have better tools for agriculture, for their jobs, their way of living.
Thank you, Arthur. I think that was really powerful. I think I really felt that. I'm sure our viewers will as well. So Naren.
Yes, Darwin, I try to think of the most realistic plan, a plan that we really need implemented in the next year or max 2 years. Like, this can't even prolong in the next 5 years because our people will be gone. But I also want to remind not only the United States government, but the international leadership and especially the nations that are so heavily involved in the politics in that region, that just quite recently, we're finding that we're not such a small minority. Right now, there are about estimated 4 million Assyrian Christians, including all of our Chaldean churches and Syriac churches, about 4 million of us. And not counting the recently founded Assyrian Jews in Israel. Some of the roots of Israel came from Assyria, the Assyrian Jews in Israel.
That's good, and great point.
Recently, even more recently, that is emerging in not just thousands, but millions. We are finding these Assyrian Muslims who were forced to Islam, and they're to a point where literally they're being monitored in some towns by the Kurdish locals to make sure they attend mosques, every week. And if they don't show up, they're knocking on their door. But these are millions. In fact, someone that I recently interviewed, he's estimating in just his nearby area, 2 million Assyrian Muslims. Darwin, this means that we can easily, just a matter of month of education and giving them a safe haven or a state, telling them, just like what happened to the Jews going back home, come back home to Assyria. Come back home to Assyria. Isaiah 19:23 prophecy is literally being unveiled in our lifetime. Come back home. We will protect you. As Athra mentioned, we will have our own military with a self-government. They will be able to choose their faith. If they want to return to their original faith or whatever they choose to do, come back home to your state, to your home that we have rebuilt, and you will be safe. You will never be harmed again. I bet you this 4 million we have in the diaspora, we have more in the Middle East. We have at least 10 to 20 million Assyrians who were ethnically cleansed, religiously cleansed, and I'm being contacted by them every single day, Darwin. I've literally read my phone in tears because people are saying just in the last 2-3 generations have forgotten who they were and asked their fathers or their grandfathers or great-grandfathers, who are we really? Do we have any kind of connection to Assyrians? And the answers they heard brought them to their knees. And what they said to them, yes, we were Assyrians not too long ago, but you know what, son? We have to do this to keep safe. So, and even Assyrians were calling themselves Kurdish, but they were saying that they speak the language of Lishan-Adiyan. Lishan-Adiyan in Assyrian means our language. So it's literally just to protect themselves, to camouflage themselves, Darwin. We can easily, if we are given our state, and I think it needs to be more than enough to not only hold our population in the Middle East, but for Assyrians that want to go back home, which we have so many refugees and immigrants, and I talk to them constantly, and they said, you know what, if we had our own region and we are safe and we know we'd be safe, I would rather go back home. And not because they're not grateful for being in the diaspora. Somebody like myself, or people that grew up here, I was born in Iraq, spent my childhood there, but people that grew up here, it'll be a little harder for them to go back home, even though I would love to. But the majority, a lot of them, I would say more than half of the recently immigrated Assyrians would definitely return back home. That I think that a province, I think that is something that we're politically asking for in the homelands, but I think what our people deserve, the people in the diaspora, what we are demanding is a state of Assyria, because we know the map of Iraq is being redrawn. In fact, the map of that region is being redrawn. And I think that the betrayal of, the World War I, World War II, I think that we really need to get to this. This needs to be done. This is something that's being put in the back burner to reestablish the state of Assyria. But for some reason, Darwin, this enemy that we have is trying so hard to prevent this from happening. And I think that international leaders need to stand firm and say, you know what, these people have suffered enough. They can't just label us as Christians anymore, because we're not only Christians. For God's sakes, we have over 10 million Assyrian Muslims who are converted by force. They're living in Turkey, in Iran, even in Syria. I just spoke to a pretty high-ranking Syrian commander who said his grandfather is Assyrian, but he's practicing the Islamic faith. And anyone else would have met him, would have thought he's just a Syrian Muslim. He's Assyrian. And that's just taking, simply going back to your original last name or what town you originated from. But I think state of Assyria is very important. I think the immediate support is definitely going to the AssyrianAid.org to financially support in this bombing situation. And I have to say about Assyrian Aid, I love this organization. I got so much feedback when I was blasting in the previous years. I got so much feedback from all of our people, from all denominations, saying, you know what? When I approached them, I was not turned down because I wasn't part of their church or their organization. Like, they help everyone that needs help. They are unbiased. They don't discriminate. They are so amazing, and they are hands-on, on the ground. They have experience doing this. And I think that as far as a political request, I think that we really need to put our mind and our heart where things need to be done. And I think that Israel financially and militarily supporting the KRG and their agenda is really harming our people. I think, being a huge advocate of Israel, I have went face to face with anti-Semitic politicians. And I think that, like I said, actions speak louder than words. I think what they need to do is really look at what happened in the Holocaust. What if somebody was supporting and financially and militarily supporting the Nazis? Like, that would break their hearts. When we see this, that they are supporting the same people who are oppressing us, it is breaking our hearts, especially when we were protecting them in Iraq, and we were neighbors with them. We loved them. We accepted them like one of ours. And that needs, this constant, no matter what happens, no matter what type of gift we are given as far as the state, when they are supporting the wrong groups, we are constantly funding and supporting the wrong groups. The financial military support needs to go to the Assyrian people. And that's not because I'm Assyrian. I promise you that all of these American lives that we sacrificed in Iraq should not go in vain. We have spent so much time in Iraq that, I've lost friends, American soldiers, and American veterans who contact me and said, I fought with all my heart, to try to give freedom to your people. And I will forever cherish that. That should not go in vain. But that region is a failed state. I'm afraid to say, from the Kurdish regional government, is a failed regional government, that that governance of that region is failed. You saw the protest, Darwin, where protesters were being attacked and bombed, and in so many great numbers. And so it's a failed state. I think an unfailed state, a state that would be beautiful, would be an alliance. And I think that we need to go straight to the state. I think a province can be easily demolished. I think we shouldn't go there more than once. I think that if we're going to do it, we need to do it right. And that way, we're not sacrificing. This won't even cost anything to the United States. In fact, this will help the United States because they're going to have a dependable ally that is a friendship that will prolong forever, for as long as this earth is standing. So I definitely believe that, we need to go straight to the point. No more beating around the bush. And we need this. We need this now, like Athra said. This is time sensitive.
And just to clarify, I'm not certain that Israel is supporting the YPG, but I'm certain that I've read research on Israel having somewhat of a relationship with the Kurds. And what sect, I don't know, but I would love to know where Israel stands on a possible Assyrian statehood and where that would stand and what are the underlying issues. I would like to know more about this. So I'm gonna do everything that I can on my end to make sure of that. But I just wanted to clarify that I don't believe that they're supporting the PKK. However, I do know that they're heavily monitoring them. So a lot of this has a lot to do with political strategy, war strategy, but I would like to see a stronger front of Assyrians supporting the statehood of the Israeli state. And also I would love to see them support the Assyrian state and be more of a stability throughout the Middle East there. So I definitely believe you said something that most people are not researching, they're not studying, they're not dealing with. So we need to put that on the forefront. So any other closing remarks, websites, anything else before we close out? I think you really took it home, Naren, and I thank you, Athra, Kato. I really do appreciate you, sir, as well. Hope we can work in the future and do more interviews, and definitely we'll get used to all working together, pushing a unified front for Iraq and for the Assyrian people. So thank you. I really appreciate everyone. And for all the future readers and those, share this message, get this out as much as possible. Let's make sure we let this go viral so that we can discuss this issue and bring it to the forefront, because I'm certain if Biden gets in, speaking about the November election, I don't believe anything is going to be resurrected from the Bible of the Assyrian people are going to be strengthened. And so I believe even if Donald Trump is reelected, we'll be able to push this agenda further about a biblical Middle East and the Assyrian people. So I would like to see that clarified from the Jewish state as well. And thank you, and God bless to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for your channel.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if you had any last words.
I just want to say whatever happens in Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Iran, just think about us, because it always affects us. It's
Absolutely.
always, even that it's like Arab mentioned, Kurds, Turks, whatever nation is mentioned, we are there affected, and most of the time negatively, not from the positive things, but always from the negative things.
Thank you, sir. Again, we have Naren Abwiya, human civil rights Assyrian activist. I really do appreciate all of you, and Mr. Kato again from the Nevada Plains, I believe, in Iraq. So we really appreciate everybody here. And as we close out, thank you and God bless.
نشكر الرب في الآرامية الذي أعاننا كي ننجز مشروع إطلاق أول قناة باللغة الفارسية، قناة ملكوت السماء. وبهذه المناسبة ندعوكم للاحتفال معنا في برامج على البث المباشر مع باقة من خدام الرب بالكلمة والترنيم، وذلك في الأيام التالية: الاحتفال باللغة العربية الاثنين 15 يونيو حزيران 8 مساء بتوقيت شرق أمريكا، 5 مساء بتوقيت كاليفورنيا. الاحتفال باللغة الإنجليزية الثلاثاء 16 يونيو حزيران 8 مساء بتوقيت شرق أمريكا، 5 مساء بتوقيت كاليفورنيا. يمكنكم مشاهدة هذه القناة على منصات التقنيات الحديثة: Apple TV, Roku TV, Fire TV, all smart TV such as Sony TV and Samsung TV, IPTV devices, boxes, IBN-SAT app, all smartphones, all smart devices, IBN website, Trinity Channel website.
Thank you for watching Trinity Channel. Please consider in your heart to give into this ministry. As it says in 2 Corinthians 9:7, so let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver.